In order to get to the 5 trillion economy, India will need significant investments to be made in infrastructure. About 103 trillion national infrastructure pipeline has been laid out. Loss rates from the last infrastructure cycle, and we, for example, in Axis Bank have suffered also, do not give the providers of capital much confidence. Many banks and investors in banks have turned cautious vis-a-vis long tenure chunky loans. Some NBFCs found to their detriment that the business model of borrowing short and lending long does not work well. The asset liability mismatch can mutate into a solvency issue. On a positive note, IBC has been a significant step, and the resolutions we have seen in some of the large problems we have had are a positive. Even though the time for resolution under the IBC process is currently 340 days against the 180 plus 90 days envisaged in the legislation. Building certain and justiciable rights for providers for capital is key to reviving risk-taking. The equation between a creditor and a debtor earlier was significantly skewed in favor of the debtor. As the NPA crisis of late 90s and the mid-2010s create stronger rights for creditors, risk-taking from the side of financiers will eventually revive. Entrepreneurs will now have to build business models that can account for the possibility that they can lose their equity ownership if the business fails. In financial services particularly, we are witnessing a significant digital disruption. So there's a new risk which is emerging, with fintech startups and large platform players vying for a piece of the pie and changing the economics of business as they do so. Frankly, if you meet some of these fintech entrepreneurs, the amount of confidence they display is quite amazing. This has created an imperative for rapid digital transformation in order to compete. These transformations across industries are leading to rapid changes in the life cycle of corporates. The pace of innovation is fast and accelerating. This is pulling down the average time that companies spend, for example, in the marquee stock market indices. This disruption is both an opportunity and a risk. Many new entrepreneurs and indeed sectors and companies will emerge that will power the growth going ahead. Indeed, disruption is not just technological but also ecological. As climate changes pervades through our lives, it creates many new risks in widely different areas of food security, disasters, and changing weather patterns impacting cities and habitations. I don't know whether you're aware, but recently Saudi Arabia had a snowfall. And Australia, which is going through one of its worst droughts, has just yesterday seen Sydney having one of the highest rainfall in its history. So we may not at this time be able to foresee all the risks that will have to be addressed in a new phase of economic growth. As we build the institutions and mechanisms to undertake this risk, we need to be constantly vigilant and agile in our response to incipient problems. Talking of institutions, let us now turn to the type of institutions that can support risk-taking in India. The banking system credit growth has moderated to around 7.1% year-on-year by the end of calendar year 2019. The first half of financial year 20 data showed a striking change in flow of funds to the commercial sector, which collapsed by 88%. On an incremental basis, flow of funds from bank decreased by rupees 1.3 trillion compared to an increase of 1.8 trillion in the same period last year. Foreign sources doubled the contribution to rupees 2 trillion in first half. The recent economic survey mentioned that India needs at least 8 banks within the world's top 100 to enable a 5 trillion economy. We are nowhere close. Since there are only a very few large private sector banks, they alone cannot fill up this list of 8 large banks. Public sector banks will have to move through their mergers and emerge with large deposit bases to kickstart lending at scale. Many of them will emerge from the prompt corrective action framework and hopefully start financing again. PSBs will need strategic and operating freedom, which the government has been talking about, to start emerging as key risk financiers. After all, let's understand and appreciate that across the world, government and its entities are the best financiers of the residual risk, which I've been talking about for the last 20-25 minutes.